All right, in this Knife Thoughts video, we're going to be looking at this knife. And as you can see, this is the Allegheny Mountain Knife Collectors Association 2019 club knife. So this video is to go along with the article that I'm writing about this knife at knifethoughts.com. So definitely check that out. You'll get a little bit more background information on the Allegheny Mountain Knife Collectors Association, how this knife came about and things like that. This video is just going to show you the knife, show you the action and things that are harder to convey through text, basically. But to get the full picture, you have to both read the article and watch the video. So don't forget to check out knifethoughts.com. But again, this is the 2019 club knife. The AMKCA makes a club knife each year. I'm part of the club, and only club members can get the knife. So this year, the past few years, they've been made by Gradation Cutlery, but this year it was made by Gradation Cutlery, and it was one of 25, so there were only 25 made. You can see I got number 6, and there you can see that it's a Northfield Unexcelled brand, number 976119. So what that means is it's a 97 pattern. It's a 6 blade, which is a saber ground clip point, and there's one blade, and it was made in 2019. It's the Allegheny pattern, and it's in autumn gold jig bone, which there's a little bit of a story behind the handle material of this knife. So again, check out the Knife Thoughts article. But to look at the knife itself, again, there's what it is. Open it up. This isn't the first time I'm opening this. This isn't an unboxing video, but I just thought I'd show you the tube as well as the knife. So I'll move this out of the way for now. One other thing that does come in the tube, it actually came in every one of these for the club, is a pin. So for the last few years, several years, Gradation Cutlery has been making pins for their knives, especially when they come out with a new pattern, which this 97 pattern is new. This is the first run of this pattern here in 2019. And they do, it's kind of, they're reporting on it, not real sure. I think they've said both 1 out of 5 tubes and 1 out of 4 tubes get a pin, but it seems like they put a pin in each of the tubes for the AMKCA knives. So you see it has the same logo as on the tube, says what it is, and it's a nice little touch. Not all of my knives have come with pins, so I don't have pins for all of the knives that have stayed in my collection, but I do have several, so I think it's a nice touch. So that's another thing that comes in the tube. And this is the knife. So the 97 pattern is a large Coke bottle pattern. So the reason it's called a Coke bottle pattern, I actually talked a lot about the Coke bottle pattern and its origins in a Knife Thoughts article on the recent Gradation Cutlery number 06 Pemberton. But it's called a Coke bottle because it has that shape. So it's wide and rounded at the bottom. It has 2 wider points here in the center of the handle. Sorry. And then it comes to a long, slender neck, just like the classic shape of a Coca-Cola bottle. So this pattern is very historic. It's been around for a long time. Again, check out that Knife Thoughts article on it if you'd like to learn more. But specifically, the large Coke bottle hunter is another very traditional pattern. So companies have been making large, slender Coke bottle knives to be used as hunting knives for a long time. And actually, a lot of people were surprised by how big this knife is. But I've seen several vintage Coke bottle hunters, and this is definitely not on the largest end of them. They get pretty big, and this is, it's not a small knife, as you can see here in my hand. My hands are relatively wide. It's not a small knife, but it's not, the biggest Coke bottle hunter I've ever seen. So the blade, as you can see, and as I said, is a saber ground clip point. That means that the grind doesn't go the whole way up like a full flat grind, and many of Gradation Cutlery knives, and including the Titty Ute version of this knife, but rather just comes part of the way up the handle. And that's something that, you know, originally might have been for extra strength. On this knife, I think it's really just an aesthetic thing. It is something that a lot of those vintage Coke bottle hunters had, and so I think that it's something they wanted to add to this Northfield version to add some of that historicity. You can see that it does also have a swedge on this side. Has a swedge along the whole length of the knife on the other side, and I think that makes for a really cool looking blade there with the grind, the flat, and then the two swedges. Now it doesn't have a swedge the whole way on the other side because it has a long pull, and you can see that it has what's called a double pull. So this is another traditional thing that has been knives have had for a long time. It's both a long pull and a nail nick. So a lot of these large hunter Coke bottles had really strong pulls. I'll talk about the pull of this knife in a little bit, but because of that, having a nail nick here at the end of the blade would give you more leverage and make it easier to open than if it just had this this long pull. Some people really dislike the double pull. I think that it's kind of cool looking, and again, I appreciate the the history, the traditionality of it. And to be honest, on this knife, it's just not practically necessary, but I appreciate the look of it. So before we get to the pull and the other issues that some people have had with these knives, I want to talk about just how nice this knife is. So this knife is super nice. It's one of the best made gradation cutlery knives I've ever had. I think it's definitely up there in the top 5 for sure. There's no gaps, so a lot of the times you can't see the gaps in videos and stuff, but there's really none on this. It is superbly fit on the back spring, between the back spring and the liners. Even if you hold it up to light, there's no gaps at all. You can see that the back spring is also flush. It's one of those things that I don't worry too much about, but a lot of collectors do, and it is flush on this. It's also flush. It's not quite perfectly flush in the half stop, but it is flush at the full open. And speaking of gaps, there's no gaps. It's a very smooth transition between the handle material and the bolster, and the on all of the bolsters. So very well fit. Just a really nicely made knife, and a good looking knife. I like the Coke bottle pattern. This is actually my third different Coke bottle pattern from Gradation Cutlery. I have the 06 that I talked about earlier, the 45 Lumberjack, and now this. And I think it makes for a comfortable grip. It's interesting to see the different sizes, and I actually might show those in this video here. But it's just a really nicely made knife. Now, like I said, this is autumn gold jigged bone, and it like I say, has a little bit of a story behind how that came about, but I'm not going to tell the whole story in this video. Rather, I'll just say that I like this color and jigging pattern a lot more than I maybe expected to. It's a little bit less plain brown and a little bit more of like a caramel malty color. I'm not sure if you can see that in the video here. I hope you can, but it is a nice, caramel, caramelized type color, especially here on this side. And the jigging is a little bit less uniform than maybe some of the pictures I saw on Gradation Cutlery's website, and I like that. I think it looks more like old, like vintage jigging than I expected. And I like the lighter areas where it's polished to transition smoothly into the bolster also. So just a really well made knife. Now some people, quite a few people on blade forums at least, reported not liking the pull strength. So like I said, a lot of vintage Coke bottle knives, large Coke bottles, had really strong pulls. This does not have a strong pull. In fact, it's for a Gradation Cutlery knife a relatively light pull. I would call it, it's closer to a 4 than it is to a 6. It's maybe around a 5, but definitely more on the 4 end of 5 than on the 6 end. So it is a lighter pull compared to other Gradation Cutlery knives, But as you can see, I have none of the bad or weak walk and talk and snap issues that people reported. Really, really nice action. So Mike Latham at Collector Knives talks about this kind of like bounce at the half stop that he really likes, and I think a lot of people kind of echoed that. And this knife really has that. I don't know if you can see that on the video, but when I push it close, it has that little bounce, and it's really nice. Let me show that again. Little bounce there when it hits the half stop, and then closing fully, you can see that it does have a very nice, very healthy snap closed, as well as open. So really nice action. I put oil in this last night, and there's still some gunk coming out, which always happens because they, have polishing compound in them and stuff. But along with that, it's super smooth. So this is one of the smoother Gradius cutlery knives I've had. I just had my 2016 Rendezvous Special 74 Mustang out, which is probably the best action I've had. And this is maybe not quite as snappy and smooth as that, but it is very, very smooth. So I just wanted to open this and close it a few times just to show how nice that action, how nice that walk and talk and snap is. So even if the spring is a little bit lighter than you might expect, it doesn't affect that. And sometimes people say, oh, if I'm using this, it'll close on me. I am in no way one of the type of people who say, oh, if you're using a knife the right way, it won't close on you because you cut with the sharp end and don't put pressure on the spine. When you're really cutting stuff and you're not just a collector, sometimes there's some pressure on the spine. So I'm not one of those people, but I do think that this is more than adequate to keep the knife open when you're using it. Now, I collect these club knives. Almost all of my knives I use, but I'm not sure that I'm going to use this one. So I don't know that I'll get to test that, and although I'd like to get another one of these knives to use, I almost for sure won't. So I can't test that, but it doesn't feel like it's weak enough that it would be a practical issue at all to me. And I have other knives that don't have super strong pulls that I do use. So that's the pull. Another issue that some people pointed out was off-center blades. And this is one of those things where, if someone posts a picture and their blade is clearly off-center, then you can't argue that people had some off-center blades on this pattern. Mine is not at all. So you can see it is maybe like a 1/2 millimeter towards the pile side, but I mean, as good as it gets, really. It doesn't. And that could even be due to the edge grind and things like that. So pretty much perfect centering. So I don't have that issue. Some of the issues that I personally look for in Gradius and cutlery knives and traditional knives in general, proud tips. The tip did not come proud. You can't really catch your finger on it or anything, even if you push down. So that's nice. I hate proud tips. And there's no blade wrap. I checked pretty thoroughly for it. I allow it to close without guiding it down, which some people say you shouldn't do that, but I think I should be able to do that. For knives made to be used, I should be able to close it on the on my pant leg without worrying about it damaging the edge. And there's no blade wrap on this knife, so that's really nice, because on these longer, slender Gradius cutlery knives and traditional knives in general, and I've even had it on some modern knives, there can be blade wrap. So just a superbly made knife. Really, really unbelievably nicely made. The grinds also seem nice and even. The edge I haven't really tested, to be honest, but it seems fine. Pretty typical for GEC, which is not super, evenly ground, or at least not super thinly ground, but a working edge. The only slight thing, and I hope you'll be able to see this, is that it almost seems like the stencil was moved. I mean, again, less than 1/2 millimeter when they were etching this AMKCA logo on, because it does look like the bases of the letters and the periods there are doubled. I think you will be able to see that there in the video. So again, absolutely not a practical issue, really not even an aesthetic issue, because unless you have a loop and are, you know, looking at this under magnification or really, really looking at it closely like I did, because, you know, I'm a knife collector and enthusiast and everything, you wouldn't notice that. But it does seem ever so slightly like it was double-edged almost. So again, not really an issue. More of, you know, not an issue. I think something that most people wouldn't notice, but I always try to be objective and, you know, mention everything rather than just being overly positive and not really giving a good review. Speaking of that, this is something that I don't care at all about because I started as a gradation cutlery collector, but some of the people at the AMKCA, being vintage knife collectors, and most vintage knives didn't have countersunk spun pins, dislike that these pins are sunken down into the handle slightly, because a lot of vintage knives were peened. All of the pins were peened. It does make cracking more likely, I believe, to peen the knives like that, to peen the pins like that, hammering them. But some of the people dislike that. I don't care at all. It's not an issue to me. It's what I'm used to because I have mostly gradation cutlery, traditional knives. Now, one thing that is not a manufacturing issue, but rather just kind of an unfortunate side effect of it being the club knife, comes from this shield. So this is the club shield. They've been using it for like several decades now on, you know, not only gradation cutlery knives, but they're yearly club knives. And as you can see, it's not pinned. So I'm gonna go grab those other Coke bottle patterns from gradation cutlery and splice it in, showing their shields and the fact that they're pinned, and then we can also compare them. Sorry for that transition there, but I wanted to grab a couple knives to show you more about the pin and also compare the Coke bottle pattern. So it's kind of the industry standard two glue shields with a lot of different companies. So I don't have a case actually right now to show you, but all case shields are glued. This is an A.G. Russell, you know, made in China, but a nice knife, and you can see there's no pin in there for the shield, so this is glued. Another example. This is USA made Camillus Remington, or Camillus made Remington, and if you look inside here where the shield is, again, no pin, but, and then of course something like a Rough Rider, the shield is glued. So it's really easy to see on this one because it's a 2-spring knife without a center liner. So there's no pin in there to keep this shield in, it's glued. And on something like this, on something like a Rough Rider, it's okay. I don't care that much. I've had shields fall out of Rough Riders and just glue them back in. Even on the A.G. Russell, you know, it's a $30 knife or so, $25 knife. And on some case knives, it's maybe okay. But I just really dislike it. I really dislike glued shields. And one thing I really like about Queen while it was still around and gradation cutlery is that they do pin their shields. So you can see right there, if you look inside, I hope you can see it, there's a little pin there holding that shield in. So it's a mechanical bond rather than just a chemical bond. And it represents a traditional step in the knife making process that is not being shortcut, right? So if you're going to put a shield on, you should do it the right way, I think. And as you can see in there, it's a lot easier to see in this one, there's the pin for the shield. So gradation cutlery knives have pin shields, as long as they're using one of gradation cutlery shields. So here's a Coke bottle pattern, and hopefully you can see inside it. It might be tough, but there's the pin for the shield. I just really like it better if there's going to be a shield that it's pinned rather than glued. It feels more traditional, it feels like they're not skipping steps, and it just gives it a more secure feel to me. So when I found out that this shield is not pinned, I was really disappointed. And interestingly, at the club meeting when I got this knife, another member of the club, and actually the the vice president, I believe, had a previous year's club knife, and the shield had fallen out because it was just glued, which that won't happen if the shield is pinned. So that goes to show that even, on a well-made knife, if the shield is glued, and it was a Great Eastern Cutlery made knife, if the shield is glued rather than being pinned, it definitely can fall out. So, I saw it on a AMKCA club knife. So I really don't like that, but again, it's not the fault of Great Eastern Cutlery because these pins are supplied by the club, and they don't have a pin on them to give the ability to pin them. So these shields from Great Eastern Cutlery that you saw have a pin attached, so you can pin it to the handle. This doesn't, and it came that way to the club. So the club got these pins, and nobody really remembers how they got them, but apparently they came without the pins, and it's just something that I don't really like about it, but it's just an aspect that comes along with being the club knife and having the club shield. But I grabbed the other Great Eastern Cutlery Coke bottle pattern knives that I have to compare, so I'll get them out. So these are all of the Coke bottle patterns that Great Eastern Cutlery has done. This is the number 06 Pemberton. You can see it has a single Wharncliffe blade, but it's a very small but similar handle shape. Not quite exactly the same because the top is more rounded than on the 97, but pretty similar. And then this is a much bigger, much fatter number 45 Lumberjack. Again, more rounded on the top than on the 97, and a lot, chunkier, but also a Coke bottle because of the swell in the center, and it's larger on the bottom end than on the top end. So these are the three Great Eastern Cutlery Coke bottle patterns that they've done, and I like them all. I think they give a good grip, like I said. They feel good in use, and I do use these two. But of the three, this one is definitely an interesting one because it is the club knife. It's only one of 25, and like I said, it's extremely well made. So despite that shield being glued, I am really happy to have gotten this knife, and it's one that I'm glad to have in my collection. And again, like I said, this video goes along with the knifethoughts.com article. So make sure you go to knifethoughts.com, read the article for the full story, and enter your email to get updates when I post new articles. And if you enjoyed this video, you can like it, leave any comments or questions, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to go out and do good.